This for my north side, south side, east end, west end, for my H-town, Seafield, 804, we them real, yeah, 2 up, 2 down, rich town, 2 up, 2 down, rich town, 2 up, 2 down, rich town, rich town.
Hey y'all, today we are talking about this crazy racial climate that we're living in now. In this moment today, we've seen the killings of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and countless others who have not been given justice, and we're living in moments where monuments are being torn down and people are targeting people because they're Black, whether they're sitting in their cars or whether they're just minding their own business doing something else. So we are living in times that are turbulent. And so the question comes to educators when we look at this time, what in the world do we do? We can't just sit back and keep teaching and keep going about our business and not address what's right outside our windows and right outside our students' windows, even though a lot of people feel like we should and just ignore it and just keep going on. We're in the middle of a pandemic where people who are Black and brown are more likely to catch the virus and more likely to suffer dire consequences. And we're just living in times where there's police brutality on the uptick and people are not getting their just desserts for what they're doing to Black folks. And it's a problem. So we as educators are kind of in this conundrum of how do we address this healthfully and effectively in our classrooms and for our students. So to talk about this, I have Miss Stephanie Granderson, who is a teacher locally here in Richmond, and I'll let her introduce herself to you guys.
Hey guys, again, my name is Stephanie Granderson and I teach in the city of Richmond. I've had a little bit of experience at the middle school level, and I'm transitioning to elementary school. My last position at a middle school was on South Side, a school that was heavily Black and Latino, and I just completely feel all of this tension. In life, it's been super, super difficult to process everything as a Black person, as a woman, as an educator here dealing with COVID, having my school year ripped from me, super, super early. It's been super, super difficult to deal with. And I definitely just feel for my students, my kids, who deal with, life struggles, in general, and now we have all of these other layers of stress and challenges and just difficulty dealing with, COVID, dealing with being in quarantine, dealing with, the monuments being pulled down in their neighborhoods. It's definitely been, a process for me, just thinking about how I feel. So thank you for inviting me and offering me a space to share my experience.
Oh, and thanks for participating in this space, because I know you're busy. I know you got a lot going on, and teaching these babies takes a lot of work. So I'm just glad you're here. So thank you.
Thank you.
So to get started, let's kind of work from maybe the kind of micro things to the bigger picture. Mm-hmm. So there have been Instagram accounts created, as you know, mm-hmm. locally here in the Richmond area of mm-hmm. School systems that are basically serving as tell-alls for racist incidents and just racist experiences that students and staff have gone through at Henrico County Public Schools, Richmond City, Hanover County, Chesterfield, et cetera, mm-hmm. et cetera. And, I should share with everyone, Stephanie and I actually went to the same high school. So mm-hmm. we grew up in Henrico County. So I was immediately drawn to the Henrico County page because I'm like, okay, I'm sure that a lot of this will resonate with me because I have had a plethora of racist experiences going to school in Henrico County, especially mm-hmm. in high school. And I think a lot of us can say the same thing. So I'm sure you've looked at some of those posts at not just the Henrico Instagram account, but all the other ones. Mm-hmm. Did you see anything that stood out to you, or in general, what do you make of these platforms on Instagram kind of revealing these, racial undertones of these school systems?
Yeah, definitely. The first page that I was drawn to, somebody shared with me, was the Black at RPS page, because that's where I work. And, seeing some of these experiences that I definitely know about, that I've witnessed firsthand, put to words, on this public platform, has been, super comforting to know that there's a safe space for people to vent things. I know that sometimes as teachers and staff, people who work in school systems, on different levels, sometimes feel very afraid to share their experiences for fear of being targeted, penalized, a lot of different things. So, that having been said, I know for a fact that a lot of these experiences are not made up, just in case there are people out there who, who are saying that, well, anybody could share these stories. I know firsthand that these are very real experiences. And recently when I looked at the Black at HCPS page on Instagram for Henrico County, I was reading some of these posts and, taking in some of these stories. And honestly, I couldn't say that I was shocked. I couldn't say that I was appalled. I couldn't say that, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening, because as a Black person, those were normal experiences, and I had to check myself that maybe I should be, these things should not be happening. There are a lot of microaggressions that a lot of people refuse to accept as racism. Yep. And I just had to take a second and reflect on my own reactions, because this shouldn't be happening when teachers, make certain comments, and I was reading about, a Latinx person who shared their experience about a teacher saying, go back to your country because of, a conversation that they were talking about. And it just is not, it's not okay. And I just appreciate the fact that, they're allowing people to share their stories, some positive, some bad. It's not just, Black issues. It's just really cool. This past school year, I can speak from experience where I had 2 white staff members use the N-word in front of me. And I just felt so stuck. I felt so imprisoned in my own body in those moments, because I have so many thoughts that came flooding into my head that nothing could come out. And I just was completely dumbfounded. I was completely frozen in my thoughts and my reaction, because I just couldn't figure out how to respond without coming off as that angry Black woman, or that woman or that Black person who's always, being too sensitive, about things. And, I know in both instances, both white staff members at the school were using it in reference to something else or something somebody else said. And I just, was reminded of this incident when I was reading on the Black at HCPS page, when there was a teacher that was using the N-word multiple times, a white teacher, and this person of color on the page was just completely offended. And when the person responded or reacted to the teacher, after class, to let them know how they felt, that teacher said, well, it's supposed to make you feel uncomfortable. And I'm just in what world is that okay for us to feel uncomfortable? In a classroom, I feel as educators, we're supposed to make sure, our classrooms are as safe as possible, are as comfortable as possible, not just for Black students, not just for white students, but all students, because at the end of the day, they're coming to learn, and I was just reminded of those 2 instances. And that was just this year, I know for a fact that these these are real events. These are real situations that people experience, like, and, because oftentimes, they come in the form of microaggressions. It's like when we respond, we come off as being sensitive.
Yep.
And, I just appreciate the fact that there are pages that are bringing this to light, these instances. And, I do appreciate our superintendent in the city, because he actually responded to the page. Somebody tagged him, and I know that not everybody likes 100% of his decisions, but this was one that I at least appreciated, because not all school leaders feel comfortable responding. So whether or not things change, who knows? Whether or not this is just something that he felt compelled to do because he felt like from a PR perspective that's what he needed to do. But at least acknowledging it, accepting it, that there are issues publicly, is at least the first step.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree. I think it's interesting when you touched on like a lot of those experiences on those different Instagram pages, and one where the teacher was using the N-word, and where the teacher tried to justify it by saying, oh, this class is supposed to make you uncomfortable. That's just such a disservice to the student. And I mean, me being like a college educator teaching college students, I definitely think that education should push people to think outside the box and to stretch their thinking and critically. I'm huge on that. Like, that's probably the pillar of my pedagogy as an instructor. But I just think about like the word you brought up, safe spaces. And there's a scholar who has introduced the phrase brave spaces. I don't know who it is, but it's basically like, it's like it's a hybrid of like safe space and like having critical space. So like a brave space would be, okay, this is definitely a safe space. No one's going to feel violated, but we're going to push your thinking a certain kind of way. But I definitely disagree with that educator saying that, using the N-word, saying the N-word in a class is pushing anyone's thinking, or anyone that's degrading the students of color, the Black students in that class, and that's showing the white students, hey, it's okay to say this word. There's nothing wrong. I mean, the teacher's saying it, so we surely can say it. Or
and it definitely.
Yeah.
Sorry. No, it definitely happened, at the University of Richmond, where we both attended. Especially taking sociology classes where, race comes up, the N-word comes up as a topic, but people feel like, oh, it's in a book, so I can say it. And I get this like uncomfortable cringe, because I just do not like, and I will not accept moving forward this idea that saying it is okay just because it's in a book. Like, you're just itching to say it, and you have this opportunity, so it's like, yes, I can say it now because it's in a book. And it's just like, for what reason? I feel like Black people in general have been oppressed on so many different levels for so long that this is just something else that there are so many like white people that just want to have, as if the privilege that they have already isn't good enough.
Yep.
So I know that may not, make everybody feel like, not everybody may agree with me in that, but it's definitely a feeling that I have, this cringy feeling when I see white people who are enthusiastic about saying it.
Oh yeah, I've seen that too. And it's funny that you bring up, college, undergrad, because I remember taking a sociology class. I don't know, maybe I was a sophomore, and my professor did use the N-word. And I think I was definitely coming into my own at that point. I was getting more vocal. I don't know if I was writing in the paper then, but shortly after that, I was probably writing for the paper, and I was finding my voice, and I was really finding my power in my voice. But I think this happened right before that time. And that same feeling you described, feeling like helpless, feeling kind of trapped because you're looking like, well, this is my professor. I was probably a freshman now that I think about it. I was probably first year. You know, you're looking at it like, okay, that's my professor. And then you're like, okay, well, we are reading from a book, like you said. And, you know, it's a scholarship. But at the same time, it's like there's an inkling inside of you that's like, something's not right about this. Because sure, you can reference the word, but you can just say the N-word. But
Right.
these people use their privilege and use and abuse it. Like you said, I totally agree. And they say to themselves, okay, well, it's in a book, it's in an interview. You know, I'm reading a quote and I'm going to say it under the guise of it's been written already. And
Right.
it's destructive and it's unnecessary.
Absolutely. It's definitely unsettling. And, you know, I definitely, as a Black person, when it comes to all of these different experiences that I have, you know, we have to pick our battles, you know, unfortunately, because if we didn't, we'd be fighting a battle every second of every single day. And occasionally, like, I want peace. I want to experience peace. You know, I don't want to pick every battle.
Yes.
But it's definitely something that we have to experience. There's somebody that I went to middle school with at Short Pump Middle School, and I haven't really kept in touch with her, but we reconnected on social media semi-recently. And, you know, as everybody started being vocal after George Floyd was murdered, you know, a lot of people initiated debates, arguments, and hearing her perspective about how systematic injustices don't exist and how, as a Christian woman, you know, we're all people of God, and, you know, we should love each other no matter what, and that people should just get over it. This is an Asian student, an Asian American student, I believe, and, you know, with a white husband, you know, and, you know, she labels her daughter as biracial. It's just a lot of different things that, like, you know, we've had to experience on social media, just hearing the things that people say. And when I respond to her and I give her examples, you know, not in a aggressive way, not in an argumentative way, like manner, you know, it was a pretty decent discussion.
Yeah.
You know, but her response was to send me links, you know, about Candace Owens and this other conservative.
Oh, God.
And I'm just like, okay, regardless of how you feel, regardless of what you think, regardless of what you agree about what she says, if you can't even vocalize, if you can't even verbalize your perspective, and all you're doing is sending me links, that means that you're not really sure about what she's saying or what, you know, this other conservative Black man was saying. You're just throwing out links from somebody that you perceive as a scholar, an intellectual, because they sound nice with their words. But if you can't actually tell me from your words, you know, about why you think systematic injustices don't exist, then, you know, I can't really accept her perspective.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just a lot.
I think that people too who do not identify as Black and do not empathize or sympathize with our plight are so quick to try to discredit our lived experiences. And you can't do that. You can't tell somebody what they're living or how they're living or what they're experiencing. You can't tell them, oh no, well actually it's this, that, and the third. And I hate when people conflate religion into things and use and abuse it to justify injustice. And I say that as a Christian, like people use and abuse Christianity and every other religion all the time just to justify that what's going on is right, or that we shouldn't be talking about it, or we shouldn't challenge it, or it should be minimized. And that's just such a disgrace.
Yeah, and I think that if we can't prove that we're being targeted, if we can't prove the injustice right then and there, people question, whether or not we should pick certain battles. When you have a history of people making you feel uncomfortable in stores and following you around, and you have this like weird feeling about browsing stores without buying something because you don't want to be perceived a certain type of way, when there are so many different things that Black people do because they're afraid of how they're perceived. It's like, oh, I'm having fun, but I can't be too loud.
Yep.
Regardless of the Beckys and the Karens at the other table, who are doing the same thing. It's like we constantly have this like this fight within ourselves, sometimes, at least, speaking from my perspective. And it's like, like this, that's an injustice, like as a Black person.
Yeah.
I can't prove it. I can't prove that, the store clerk was following me around because I'm Black. I can't prove it. I can't prove that, but it's like, if I can't prove it, then some people, like this friend from middle school, like, they refuse to accept it. And it's just crazy.
And even when you do prove it, it seems like that they're going to find some kind of loophole. Well, you didn't do this, or why didn't you say anything? It's just crazy. But going back to the Black at HCPS page, it's just one post that really stood out to me, just thinking about Black girls and women and how, we are perceived in schools and how we're criminalized and how nuanced it is. So I'm just going to read it really quickly. It says, I have a thicker body type, and throughout the years, I was constantly dress coded for wearing shorts, shirts, and dresses that were within the rules, and always was told that I'm not allowed to wear it and have to sit in ALC. I guess that's some kind of like in-school suspension all day. But I would always see skinny white girls wear big, long T-shirts that came to just below their butts and covered their shorts, or white girls that walk around with crop tops with their entire midriff out. And I've never seen a white person in ALC for dress code. And admin's excuse was, quote, oh, we can't catch everyone, quote, even after I pointed out someone as they were talking to me and they did nothing. So that just really, just being Black women and just thinking about our bodies and how our bodies are criminalized. And there's so much scholarship now on this, which I think is so great, because it's something that definitely isn't in enough conversations. I feel like when we talk practically about this, like schools, and it's something that is just such a specific experience when you're a Black girl and you're just wearing shorts because it's hot, and you're constantly, chastised because of how the shorts fall, and you're constantly subject to other people who are not Black. I would even go as far as that, just in general, who are not Black, who are not being targeted in this way. And the way that the targeting is criminalized, because you're going to in-school suspension, or you're being sent to the principal's office. And I just think about the school to prison pipeline with that, and the criminalization of Black girls. If we think about like Push Out by Monique Morris and all the other scholars that are out there talking about this.
Absolutely. It's
just really disheartening, and it just really shows that, wow, this stuff is already going on in the schools. So when we see people, on the news being killed, or women being raped and murdered because they're Black, it's like, how could you not talk about this stuff in the classroom or somehow incorporate it in the school? Because the school is just a microcosm of the outside world.
It really is. And I definitely Short Pump Middle School, 7th grade, 2001, 2002 school year. I can, like, the same exact experience, except instead of in-school suspension, it was, an unflattering, gross looking gym shorts, and they said it had to be fingertip length. I showed the teacher that it was fingertip length, and that wasn't good enough, and it just, it just blows me that, like, when there are facts like like there's proof, there's measurements, you know, you can pull out the school code of ethics or whatever, you know, rules of conduct that, you know, a school system has, and you can prove it. And it's never going to be good enough. And
Nope.
you know, until, you know, things are pointed out, you know, on like a deeper level, not just on the surface, until, you know, people's like mind frames change, it's going to continue to happen. And it definitely sucks. And it's like, I never really thought about this, you know, like on a deeper level as a super huge issue, because it just happens so often.
Yep.
And at my previous middle school, it was Black female students saying the same thing about Latino female students. And it definitely created this like racial tension, you know, that like isn't really created by the students.
Yeah.
You know, it's created, the tension that's created by the system, you know,
Definitely.
like pitting students against each other because these Black female students aren't being treated like equally.
Nope.
Like it's like it's just a shame. But I appreciate the opportunity that people have to share their stories, and I hope that it gets recognized on a bigger level than just Instagram.
I totally agree. So speaking of that, like, let's talk about like the students really quickly. So what have you noticed, or just not even talking about this moment in time, but in general, because racial violence happens all the time, really, but it's just that these particular cases have gained traction because a lot of people have realized that the perpetrators have not been served justice, who have, you know, murdered and, you know, raped and shot down and, you know, victimized these people for just being Black. But it happens around us all the time. So how do the students react to that in the classroom, or do you see it?
Yeah, definitely. Students bring in, you know, their emotions. They're very honest about, especially, you know, in middle school, they're very honest, and they don't really have, you know, much of a filter when it comes to, you know, what you should say, who you should say it to, or maybe it's just the safe space that like I've created with my students. But I've definitely been privy to a lot of their experiences, how they feel about politics, the president, and it definitely stresses them out. Like, we've had days where a lot of our Latino students didn't come to school because they were afraid that ICE was coming into Southwood specifically. You know, we've had days that physically affects us, you know, and we support our students. I support my students in speaking up for themselves. I definitely try to get them to, one, pick their battles, you know, and two, go about, like, don't give up on their struggles. Don't give up on, you know, standing up for themselves, whether it's against me as a teacher or the principal. You know, just go about it in the right way so that you can actually make change. You know, if there's an issue that happens, you know, not cursing out the teacher, you know, because other teachers can use that as ammo against them. You know, I'm like, get your parent to speak up for you, send an email, you know, like, teachers aren't perfect, no, but it doesn't mean that things are like excusable. Like, you know, it's just sad to see my students go through these things, and knowing that the communities that they live in, you know, knowing about the little Black boy who died from, you know, in Hillside, knowing that like they're emotionally like affected, and some of them are even just numb. They're so numb because, you know, seeing somebody get arrested, or hearing about somebody get shot, or, you know, I had a student who showed me the wound on his back that he got from a gun, from a bullet, you know, that grazed him. And it's just, these aren't the experiences that a lot of privileged people go through, you know, and it's sad, it's unfair, but at the same time, we as teachers don't really have time to grieve, to deal with things on an emotional level, because at the end of the day, life moves on. Like the sun rises and goes down like every single day, and no matter how I feel, no matter how my students feel, like time moves on, and it's just difficult sometimes, because sometimes I want to cry, sometimes I want to break down, but I can't do that in front of my students, because they need somebody strong. They need somebody to keep pushing them to move forward, to live for another day. So as a teacher, that definitely, can be a struggle, but.
That's very powerful what you said, and that's a heavy burden to be there for them, and then you're trying to keep up with your own emotional well-being, and you're trying to stay strong for them, because they need somebody to be strong for them with everything. Wow. So what do you think could be done in your school or in any school to support teachers, and specifically thinking K-12 probably, who have to support and who want to support Black students going through these, particular experiences, from witnessing, hearing about, living through racism, structural racism, institutional racism, racial violence, police brutality, you name it.
Yeah, I definitely know that it's very difficult to change the mindset of adults who don't really listen to absorb information. They already have a response to what somebody's going to say. If you say Black Lives Matter, it doesn't matter what you say after that, they're going to have a response. People, teachers, administration, these higher ups, they've already been like groomed to their thinking. And honestly, I think that things have to start young. I don't really know how much change there can be at, my previous middle school. There were so many like trainings on like cultural competencies, so many trainings on, like our students' lives and taking things into consideration, and ACEs and adverse childhood experiences that affect them, and how we shouldn't judge our kids, if, their uncle gets shot, over the weekend, and on Monday they come in with an attitude and they're not really paying attention. Okay, well, maybe, they're not just being a jerk. Maybe they're just dealing with their emotions in an unhealthy way, and they don't know how to deal with it. So many kids are forced to go to school, after these traumatic experiences over the weekend or previous evenings. And, there's so many trainings on it, yet I don't see changes happening, not even incrementally. Like, I honestly think that things have to be done, from a younger age. We need to teach people about discrimination. We need to teach people not just about blatant racism, the things that people say and do, but the colorblind racism that is a thing. We need to teach people about microaggressions that people express, people do without even consciously knowing it. We need to teach people about kids, about systematic injustices that are barriers that they need to overcome, not as things that are going to prevent them from success, but things that they're going to have to push past. We need to teach, our privileged youth about their privilege so that they can accept it moving forward. There's a video that I watched on Instagram recently, and I watched it again in previous years, about this race that these young adults were going to do for a significant amount of money. And it was like, take a step forward if you've lived with both parents, take a step forward and it just gave different examples of privilege. And it was just really interesting to see the mostly white students in front of the mostly Black students, not just people of color, but Black students.
Yeah.
I believe they were like college students. And, there was this like wake up call that you can see in their facial expressions. And they still did the race and they didn't really say who won, but it was this encouragement about pushing past it, no matter what your barriers are, and we need to groom our youth to not be racist.
Yeah.
You know, we need to groom our youth, especially our Black youth and other youth of color. We need to encourage them to value their race, to value their ethnicity, to value their experiences, whether good or bad, and use them to be successful, like to use it, you know, by their own definitions of success.
Yeah.
But it's just really difficult because I know that these trainings aren't enough. Like this 1 hour training on a Thursday evening for professional development that happens every week, you know, that you're having at the end of the school day, after all the teachers are tired, after all the teachers have been, you know, like spit on and just, you know, kicked and cursed out, you know, who's in a mental space to accept, you know, their privilege. You know, it doesn't help.
You brought up a lot of brilliant points and suggestions, I feel like, that need to be sent to your school or talked about to your higher ups or whoever. And then something that you mentioned that really resonated with me is this whole idea of like pre-packaged trainings and, you know, and that makes me even think of these book clubs and, you know, everybody's reading White Fragility now and everybody's reading, you know, all sorts of anti-racist scholarship. But it seems like you're saying that this stuff is done to check a box.
Yeah.
It just seems like a lot of times, I mean, not with everything, just a lot of things I hear about, it doesn't feel genuine, and it feels like, okay, we've come up with this way to, you know, fast track stuff that we should have learned, like you said, when we were children. So let's do it really quick and get this badge and put this sticker on our office door and XYZ. And I mean, I'm being critical, but at the same time, you know, being, you know, teaching in college, we have safe zone trainings and we have recovery ally trainings, and I've gone to these trainings, and, you know, I do think that they're useful. I'm not knocking those, but I think that racism and even those other things that I mentioned, recovery and LGBTQ issues, I think that stuff deserves, you know, a little bit more credit than just a training or meeting up once a week reading a book. And I don't know. Go ahead.
Sorry. I was just saying, I definitely agree with you, and I've definitely been to some of those trainings at U of R, and I came out from the trainings with like a different perspective when it came to a lot of different things. But I definitely feel like what you put in is what you put out, and there's no guarantee that everybody is putting in, you know, what they need to put in so they can get out meaningful, like, information, a meaningful perspective.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, especially if they're just forced to go to these trainings, it's not like you said, it's not genuine. Their you know, their participation is not genuine. And I definitely think that, you know, more than an hour, you know, at the end of the day is not good enough for teachers who are not culturally competent, who are not aware, or people in general who say, well, my best friend is Black, so you know, I'm not racism, or I don't see color. I'm Black. Like, I identify as Black. You're gonna see this,
right? Absolutely.
Like, I'm not the same as this Karen, as this Becky, as this Juanita, as this anybody. Like, I'm Black, and you're gonna see this color. Like, we're not the same, and we shouldn't be forced to be.
Totally.
But I definitely feel like we can do better with these trainings, and we can do better with grooming our youth to pay attention, you know, no matter where you fall on this spectrum, you know, of color. Like, I'm aware of my privilege, and I may not always acknowledge it, and I refuse to accept that I know it all when it comes to my privilege. And I think that if we all checked ourselves and we all, accepted that we're not perfect, then, maybe we all can move forward.
Yeah, definitely. I think too, it's interesting to just think about, like, when you said with the trainings, you get in what you put out, basically. As far as when you go, are you actively listening? Are you thinking about this stuff beyond the training? Are you practicing this stuff in your classroom? I think that's important, and it really makes me think about just people I know and people that I've interacted with, just generally in workspaces and, student spaces and being in school. And there are people I know who will go to all these trainings and they'll be at everything and they'll have every sticker for this kind of training, that thing, that book club. Oh, I went to that conference. Oh, I presented at this thing. But these are the same people who are my peers that when I pass them in the hall or I pass them, I have to work with them in a room or in a group setting, that will not look me in the eye or give me the time of day to speak. And we all know that microaggression. That's because you're Black, and that's because they feel like you don't really have much to offer. So why do I have to look you in the eye and ask for your opinion or whatsoever? So I think that really just speaks volumes to what you said about, how you engage in these trainings or whatever these things are, is what you'll get out of it. And so many times I think that the wrong people are getting into these spaces just, for clout, just for their own reasoning. And it just reflects negatively on, where they work, the work that they're doing, the students that they serve. And it's just hard to, filter that out,
Absolutely. There are definitely people who actively engage, and I say actively intentionally, like actively engage in discussions and activities. And then you have people who just come to just say that they came. And then you have people who are a little bit more obvious with their racism, who aren't even like thinking about participating. And it's like at a certain age, it takes more than a training, because things are going in one ear and out the other, or they're not even going in the ear because they refuse to let it. And these are the people, these are the adults that are making impressions on our youth. I think about the girl that I went to for middle school, and she's raising a daughter with her perspective and with the perspective of her husband, who, completely ignore the fact that injustices exist and say things like, just get over it. But, and her daughter's going to grow up, no matter what her experiences are, with those things in the back of her mind. And I think that, we as educators do our best to, open the minds of our students, as much as we can. But at the end of the day, if their parent, especially at a young age, is pulling you in this direction, and I'm not even trying to pull you in any direction, as I am just encouraging them to be open, it's like, it's just difficult. And when you have teachers that have really messed up, ideologies, it's like, it sucks. I think that, it's just really going to be a difficult process. But I definitely feel optimistic about what can be done. I definitely feel like there are things that can be done, and I think that it's going to take time. I know that a lot of times people are like, I have the solution, and after a few months, they're like, nope, it's not working. Let's try something else, And that's how it is with like education in the city, when we have superintendent who has, these goals and these ideas, and then for whatever political reasons, they disappear, and somebody else comes in, and they're like, I have the solution, I have military background, and they try their way, but after a few months, people are like, oh, it's not working, so let's try something else. And now we have this superintendent from, I believe, New York, maybe Maryland. I don't really remember, honestly, but he's taking his experiences, not in Virginia, not in the city of Richmond.
Oh, Lord.
I just at least appreciate the fact that he was a teacher, because, it's not always the experience of the people who are making decisions for teachers. Mm-hmm. So, I think that's a separate issue, but I definitely think that we need to work with our youth from young as much as possible, so that when they do grow up, this like colorblind racism, these microaggressions, these blatant like physical, verbal racism, acts of racism, are minimized as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So, just one more thing I wanted to talk about is this new legislation that's being proposed here in Virginia. Yeah, I'm sure you know about it, where they are pushing for teachers, people in teacher training or teacher education, to be required to be certified in African American history and to actually take courses on African American history and things of that nature. So I'm curious, especially you being a K-12 teacher in a predominantly Black area, with predominantly Black classrooms, what do you think of this? Do you think that this is a step in the right direction, or do you think this is too little too late, or what are your thoughts on this?
Initially, my thought was, okay, well, what harm could it do? It would be really nice if everybody was familiar with African American history. Maybe this girl from my middle school, maybe, she would accept that systematic injustices exist if she really understood, how politics and how political decisions have been made for Black people since we've been present, in North America, like since we've been brought here. Like, I definitely thought that, like, this would be cool. But then I started to think about like my experience, not as an African American, but like as an Afro-Caribbean American whose ancestors, weren't slaves here, maybe slaves in the Caribbean, but I was like, maybe we need to do more than just think about the history of African Americans. I definitely think that we need to focus like on current issues, and I know that a part of that stems from accepting what happened in the past. Yeah. But I've heard a lot of conversations with people who refuse to accept that issues exist, who say things like, oh, why can't we all get along? Or instead of having, a union for Black people, we need to have a union for multicultural people. Instead of saying Black Lives Matter, we need to have all lives matter. And, the fact that that's problematic, like, it stems from, like, issues today. I definitely think that we need to encourage people. Like, I think this issue is not as much about the lack of like knowledge about the history of African Americans as much as it is like the lack of knowledge about current social injustices and inequities. I definitely think that, sure, that's nice, but if we're going to talk about history, a semester like long class, I don't know if that's going to be enough to move us in the right direction. I just think that it needs to be more than just that. I think that like our Latino American students their history is a little bit different, but a lot of their issues right now today stem from current policies that exist, And I think that in order to move forward, like, we need to teach our kids about colorblind racism, about microaggressions, about all of these different things, like, not just, oh, this is what happened, in the 1300s, black people were pitted against each other, that's nice. Oh, slavery officially ended.
Yeah,
and then there was Jim Crow, or you want to throw in indentured servitude too, and you want to be like, oh, you can bring in Plessy versus Ferguson and separate but equal. Then we're like, oh, we found out that we're not actually equal when we're separate. We can talk about all of those things in the history of African Americans, but let's talk about the things that are today. It's like, a lot of people tend to feel like, oh, because slavery was such a long time ago, why do we keep bringing it up? People have opportunities that are equal, but if we actually look at white flight that happened in the 70s and how that still affects us today, and redlining that still exists unofficially. Yes. It's like, knowing about it in history is nice throughout history, but let's talk about how it still impacts us today. And that's where I feel like we need to focus, because there are so many people that refuse to accept that we have equal opportunity.
Mm-hmm. I totally feel you. Yeah, I mean, I guess I have like a two-pronged perspective on it. I do think the history piece is important. It makes me think back to my experience in a teacher ed history class when I was working on my PhD. I had to take like a history class. It was like required. And a lot of those students, and I even had conversations with my professor about this. They were, soon to be history teachers. Their perspectives on a lot of things we talked about were very whitewashed and very colorblind almost, and very much excluding minority voices and minority experiences. And I couldn't believe my eyes, because I'm looking like, okay, y'all are about to be history teachers. Like, I'm in this class because I'm sure I need some kind of historical perspective to get my degree or whatever. But I'm like, y'all are about to be somebody's AP history teacher, world history 1 teacher, or US history teacher. And you guys are, minimizing things like slavery and Jim Crow and, just very disturbing stuff. So like that experience makes me feel like, yeah, let's have them do some Black history stuff. But I also understand what you're saying too, because I think that shouldn't be the focus of it all. I think that the history component should be included, yes, but as you're saying, there needs to be a connection between that history stuff to what's going on now. So these naysayers and these colorblind folk and these people that are just totally out of pocket when it comes to Black experience and, structural racism and things like that can see the connection. And sometimes they may still not be able to see it, or they may be refusing to recognize it. But at least that can be something that these teacher education programs can know that they did their part,
Absolutely. I definitely feel like, even in college, people are going to take in what they want to take in. And it's definitely super crazy that like representation, doesn't exist even at like a higher ed, environment, like whether we're talking about, the history of anything in the past, like it definitely blows my mind that, lack of history or lack of awareness about history is still a thing. I definitely feel like today facts science, with a lot of resources that we have, like we shouldn't be at this point where we're teaching, white people that like racism existed in history and these, examples. We shouldn't
have to do that.
Like we should be past the fact that like we should be past the point of like accepting that things went on through history. We should be past this point of like refusing to spread awareness about things throughout history. I definitely think that, in my experience with people that I've worked with, there seems to be this level of awareness about things that have gone on throughout history. But it's the perspective is definitely curved. I definitely think that here in Virginia, when it comes to the standards that we have to teach our students to pass this SOL test, can be better. I think that, and in the 6th grade is when, in 6th grade history standards is when they go through the American Revolution to, I believe, like the 1800s, 1865, and it's that's supposed to be the year that like, slavery officially ended and all of these things. And when I look at the work that like students have to complete for history, it's definitely bland. It's definitely, not relevant. And I think that we need to curve our perspective, or the perspective that we're supposed to be teaching our kids. Like we need to gear it to more like, these are the experiences, and like let's actually focus on why this is important, like why it's important for not just Black people to know these things. And instead it's just like, oh, these are dates, these are people, we still celebrate Christopher Columbus as if like he needs to be celebrated. There are all these people. So I definitely feel like, thinking about like what you said about your experience with, the people you were in class with and those future history educators, like maybe we definitely should focus on that as well.
Yeah.
Like, but I definitely think that there's a lot to be tackled.
Oh yeah.
But it's definitely possible. Like if I'm aware of it, at age 30, like, and I've gone through like my perspective like changing over time with a lot of different things. Like other people can be made aware too. And I'm not saying that like I know everything. I'm not saying that my perspective is going to change, but the little that I do know, the little that I am made aware of.
Girl, you know a lot. you stop shortchanging yourself. Like
I just know that there's so much more out there. I think there's like way more information out there. Not to say that I'm ignorant or I think I'm ignorant, but I definitely think that from what I know right now, like it's definitely possible to teach at least our youth, when it comes to people who refuse, people who are out of pocket, as you said, with certain things, unteaching, might take a lot more effort.
Yeah.
But if we start young, then there's definitely more hope for the future.
Yeah, totally agree. So kind of to end on like a self-care type note. So we've talked about all these things that, we deal with, and especially that you deal with in, K-12 and dealing with race and, racism for your students and dealing with it yourself, microaggressions that you deal with as a teacher and helping them, guiding them as students through their own experiences and still managing to teach these students what they need to know and still managing to have your own life and take care of yourself. What advice would you give other Black women educators out there, or not even just educators, Black women out there just on their hustle period, dealing with these, these experiences and navigating the world while having to serve people, whether it's students or clients in mental health or patients as, medical doctors or whatever it is, while doing that, while serving other people? What advice do you have, or what do you think you're learning as you go through your journey on, the best ways to take care of yourself amidst all of this going on?
There are definitely quite a few things that I do to stay sane during these crazy times, and I definitely, limit my social media usage to certain times. But I definitely think that no matter, what you choose to do, just continue to love yourself and continue to remind yourself that you as a person of color are valued. Yes, you're going to go through struggles. Yes, things are unfair, but just remember that you're valued, and remember that you can push through anything that anybody else can. It just may take a little bit more time. It may be a little bit more of a bumpy road, because of the circumstances that you were born with. But remember that you are valued. Being Black is a positive thing. Being Black is worth so much to celebrate about, and just continue to remember that you're loved and love yourself, and remember that when things get tough, remember that you're worth not giving up on. And I've definitely been helped along the way. It's definitely not my perspective has been, shaped by the people in my circle who love me and who I love. But being reminded of those things definitely helped me push forward, definitely helped me to not give up, so I definitely want you to remember that you're loved.
Yeah. And to piggyback on that, what you were saying about having a village and being helped along the way, I think that's really important to mention. I think for a couple of reasons. I think one, it's okay to take help. It's okay to be tired. It's okay to be like, look, I need a break, or I need a breather. I need to step back from work within reason, and have a mental health day, or just watch some mindless TV for 2 hours, or just spend time with your significant other, or whatever that looks like. Go to the park. And then in the same breath, I think it's important that we also pay it forward. So I'm kind of in this weird, interesting, I don't know if full circle is the best way to describe it, but this interesting place in my life where being a professor, I'm teaching these young people, and I have a lot of young Black men and women that I've had the privilege of teaching. Teaching everyone is a privilege, but it's just very much a different experience. Seeing yourself in your classroom, seeing yourself 10 years prior or more prior.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's something that's really a trip, right? That's really something.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and for me with that, there's certain things I can pick up on, because it's like I was that person 10 years ago. I was that person when I was 20 years old. So different mannerisms, different, patterns in work or in their expressions, I can tell, look, or I may ask, how's it going today? What's going on? And, even just knowing that, hey, I'm just about 10 years removed from where they are, that helps you to bring, into the classroom what's relevant, or what you think is relevant to them. Or it gives you the, space to even ask yourself, wow, I need to ask them, what works best for them.
Absolutely.
And you have that context, and just being able to pay it forward. I know for me, I mentor a group of girls, a group of Black and brown girls that were my former students, I guess, going on 2 years ago. So, before COVID-19, we were meeting up once a month. We were talking about different issues that they wanted to talk about. I had my mom come in, who's a therapist, and talk to them about self-care. And she talked with them one-on-one, some of them one-on-one. And just being able to, one girl I had a Zoom session with like 2 weeks ago, and she's been going to all the protests here in Richmond every day. And, she just was debriefing about that and her identity and, what she's been doing, participating in this work and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And just being able to guide these young people and just know, okay, I went through X, Y, Z before. This is what I did. If that helps you, or to know, for me being a writing professor, if I know, this person is trying to go to nursing school or whatever, then I will say, okay, well, let me look at your personal statement, because I'm looking at their work thinking, okay, well, maybe they might need to brush up on X, Y, Z. Mm-hmm. So I feel like we have like that sixth sense with certain things that we know, may come up, especially for Black students, those microaggressions. And I had a student come to my office last year. She wanted to do a project that we had in class on police brutality, and she was nervous, and she was like, I don't know what the other, students are going to say. So we had a really good session. Basically, I was trying to drop some gems on, hey, you can still write about what you want to in college, but maybe frame it this way so that you're still doing what you want to do, but you're not being held back by, microaggressions of others or opinions of others. So things like that, I think, is just so important that we do. And I think it's also something that helps us, because I think it's a way for us to see, okay, wow, our experiences are coming full circle, and we can learn something from some of the, not so cool stuff we've gone through, and, guide these young people or younger people, in their journeys and what they're doing. And, when they tell you a teacher was mistreating them, you can, maybe talk about something you went through and help them see a different perspective and
absolutely
like that.
I think it also gives them, the hope is that it gives them hope. Yeah. And it gives them like optimism about their own future, to know that, okay, Dr. Lee was once in my shoes, if she got through it, maybe I can get through it too. So I think that offers a little bit of positivity about the things that they're going through when they're going through it, because Lord knows that when you're going through something,
it's
way worse than when you look back at the situation. You're like, okay, I got through it. So seeing you and your successes and where you are, and I definitely hope that it gives them hope, about their own situations, whether it's being targeted by a professor, or you're giving a presentation and you're not sure about what students are going to, other peers are going to say. Knowing about your story, knowing about the things that you've gone through, I definitely think that it gives them hope and optimism about their own situations.
And likewise, you too. I mean, you definitely are a leader for those kids, and just your presence and just you being a soundboard for things that they're going through. I mean, I know a lot of teachers that I had coming up, or I knew of coming up, that wouldn't give a student the time of day for an issue. And you take time out of your personal time to help those kids. And you've taken kids to the store to get them clothes, man. So it doesn't get much better than that, Steph, like as far as like an educator that cares and that pays it forward, So I think that's important. Yeah. Well, that's all we have for today. I think it's important to think about, everything that we talked about, but especially with thinking about serving these students. If we're truly educators and we're truly about the students, and we've all heard the phrase like student-centered classrooms and all that stuff, there's no way to not take into account the world around us as it's literally crumbling, it feels like. But there's no way to not take that into consideration when we write up our plans, or when we come up with our assignments, or when we design our classroom, or, you know,
Absolutely.
yeah, when we communicate with teachers, when we communicate with students, everything. There's no way to not consider that. And I just hope that, I just hope that everybody listening can really take that point home among everything else we talked about. But it was a pleasure having you for the first episode, girl. This was so good.
This was a really good conversation.
Yeah. And a lot of people need to hear this, because a lot of people are just unaware of a lot, you know?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I look forward to, you know, listening to other perspectives with other people that you have on your show podcast. I definitely look forward to that, because, you know, we all learn from each other. And, you know, we can only encourage each other, learn from each other, and grow from each other.
In the words of Maya Angelou, when you know better, you do better. Let's do better, y'all. Peace.
This for my north side, south side, east end, west end, for my east town, Seafield, 804, we them real, yeah, 2 up, 2 down, rich town, 2 up, 2 down, rich town, 2 up, 2 down, rich town.